Okay, so today we're going deep on Nikola Tesla, a guy who walked a very interesting line between genius and, well, let's call it eccentricity. We're using Wizard, the biography by Marc Seifer, and let me tell you, this one gets pretty wild. Did you know Tesla was absolutely convinced he was picking up signals from Martians?
Yeah, and this wasn't just like a passing thought for him either. Tesla's really adamant about it, even suggesting we could use giant mirrors to reflect sunlight back to them to communicate. Which kind of raises the question, was this a sign of mental instability, a mind that was both brilliant but maybe a little troubled? Or was
Yeah.
Tesla just, like some people believe, years ahead of his time? Like his vision just exceeded the grasp of science back then?
That's exactly what we're here to explore, that possible connection between
Well,
creativity and what you might call unconventional thinking. And you got to admit, Tesla's a perfect case study. I mean, on one hand, he revolutionized the world with AC power, the very foundation of our power grid. But on the other hand, he chased some ideas that they seemed a bit out there. So where do we even begin with this guy?
well, Seifer takes us all the way back to Tesla's childhood. Maybe there's some clues there. He was born in Serbia, part of a close-knit clan they call a Zadruga. Imagine a community where everything was about cooperation and shared resources. Now, his father was an Orthodox priest, and he wanted Nikola to follow in his footsteps. You know, a life of faith and tradition. But young Tesla was already fascinated by electricity. He had other plans.
Okay, wait, back up a sec. This is a Druga thing. Could that have actually shaped Tesla's worldview? That drive to create inventions that helped everyone. It's pretty different from someone like Edison, who was all about business and individual ambition.
Yeah, you're right. The Zadruga was all about the collective good, shared responsibility. That's the opposite of the world of patents and profits. And maybe that difference in values, how they thought about invention and progress. Maybe that's why Tesla and Edison clashed so much later on.
And speaking of clashes, what about Tesla's first experience with electricity? It's almost too perfect. He's a kid playing with his cat. Static electricity sparks from the fur. Boom. Lifelong fascination. To the point he defies his dad and goes into engineering.
It is a pretty amazing story, right? But Seifer thinks it was more than just a cute anecdote. He argues this early fascination with invisible forces, with energy you can feel and see. It set the stage for Tesla's obsession with harnessing the power of the universe itself.
That's a really cool way to look at it. So we have this young Tesla defying expectations, driven by this deep curiosity about the forces of nature. And eventually he heads to America, land of opportunity, right? Where he runs into another giant of invention, Thomas Edison. But they didn't exactly hit it off, did they?
Not even close. This is where personality and business really clash. Edison was all business, pushing direct current or DC power. Tesla was the visionary. He believed in alternating current, AC, a system that could transmit power over huge distances with way less loss.
Right, the famous War of the Currents. But what made AC so groundbreaking? Was it just about being more efficient? Or was there something more to it?
It goes way beyond efficiency. Think about it. DC power could only travel short distances, limiting what you could do. But with AC, suddenly you can power whole cities, industries, continents even, all from one power source. This wasn't about light bulbs anymore. This was about connecting the world, about making Tesla's vision of a future powered by this invisible web of energy a reality.
So you have Tesla with this huge vision of a world connected by electricity. And Edison focused on what was practical and what would sell. It wasn't just a clash of ideas, it was a clash of philosophies. And in the end, AC won out, right? It became the foundation for the modern electrical grid.
Exactly. But even after that huge win, Tesla's life wasn't easy. Money problems, fierce competition. He was even accused of being a mad scientist in his later years.
And that brings us back to those Martian messages. Was this just a brilliant mind going off the rails? Or were these ideas maybe not as crazy as they sounded at first? We'll dig into that mystery in the rest of Tesla's life after this. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about those Martian messages that Tesla was so sure he was picking up. I mean, it's easy to think, okay, that's a little out there, right? But Tesla was really serious about this stuff, even talking about using giant mirrors to reflect sunlight back to Mars as a way to talk to them.
You know, it's important to remember what things were like back then. This was the end of the 19th century, a time when science was really taking off. The idea of life on other planets wasn't some crazy fringe theory. It was something scientists were seriously debating. So for Tesla, with his big imagination, it makes sense that he was drawn to this idea.
But if the idea itself wasn't so weird back then, why did people give Tesla so much trouble for it? Why all the skepticism and ridicule?
Well, because Tesla wasn't just saying, hey, maybe there are Martians. He was saying, I've heard them, I'm telling you. He even wrote articles about these strange rhythmic signals he picked up when he was messing around with his giant wireless transmission tower in Colorado Springs.
Right, that tower that was supposed to transmit power wirelessly.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to think about how ambitious that project was. But how does that tie into the Martian communication thing?
Well, Tesla thought his system, what he called the world system, could send more than just power. He thought it could send information, too, across huge distances. He had this vision of a global network connecting everyone, sharing information, all powered by the forces of the universe itself.
So his wireless power idea and this extraterrestrial communication thing, they were all part of the same big idea.
Exactly. He saw them as connected. But a lot of scientists back then saw it as proof that he'd gone a little nuts. Some people even said the signals he was hearing weren't from Mars at all. They said it was probably just Guglielmo Marconi, who was doing his own long-distance radio experiments around the same time.
Hold on, even if Tesla was wrong about where those signals were coming from, doesn't his idea for a global wireless communication system sound a lot like, well, the internet? It seems like he was onto something, even if the details weren't quite right.
That's a good point. Tesla was definitely ahead of his time in a lot of ways. He saw the potential of wireless technology way before anyone else. But he had this thing about being in control, this reluctance to work with others. And he didn't like other people's work very much. And all that really slowed him down.
So it's like this mix of genius, ambition, and maybe a bit of ego, right? On one hand, he's this amazing innovator pushing the limits of what's possible, but on the other hand, he couldn't compromise or work with the scientific community, and that might have held him back in the end.
Yeah, it's a classic case of the struggle between individual brilliance and the need for collaboration in science. Tesla was so sure of his own ideas that he ended up pushing away people who could have helped him. That, and all the wild claims he was making. Eventually, the scientific community just sort of stopped taking him seriously.
But his work on alternating current, his dream of a world powered by wireless energy, those ideas are still with us today. It makes you wonder what he could have accomplished if he was a little more practical.
It's a question that follows Tesla everywhere. Was he just too far ahead of his time? Or was it his personality, his inability to work within the system, that led to his downfall?
It's a fascinating story, and honestly a little sad too. There's still so much to talk about. Like Tesla's later years and all those big, maybe even outlandish projects he got involved in. We'll get into all that after a quick word from our sponsors. So we're back and still digging into the life of Nikola Tesla. This guy who was both a total genius and, well, let's just say he had some unconventional ideas.
Yeah, and as we get into his later years, that mix of brilliance and, well, what some might call eccentricity, it really starts to show.
It's almost like his ideas, his ambitions, they just kept getting bigger and bigger, like his obsession with wireless power. He actually imagined a world where energy could be beamed across continents, powering everything without any wires. It sounds like something out of science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? But Tesla was absolutely certain it could be done. He put everything he had,
Time, energy.
money too, into building this huge tower on Long Island called Wardenclyffe. It was supposed to be the prototype for his global wireless power system.
Wardcliffe.
Yeah.
That's one of those Tesla projects that's kind of mysterious and honestly a little controversial. It didn't work out in the end, did it? What happened?
Well, a lot of things went wrong. First of all, the project was just enormous. It needed a ton of money, and Tesla just couldn't get it. He kind of pushed away potential investors. He was acting a little erratic, and he always had to be in complete control.
It seems like that need for control, that not wanting to compromise, that was a pattern throughout Tesla's life.
Yeah, definitely. And it wasn't just the money. Some scientists thought his whole theory about wireless power was flawed. They said it just wouldn't work even if he had all the money in the world.
So you have this incredibly smart guy, right? He can imagine these technologies that seem impossible. But then he struggles with the basic laws of physics, money problems. He even has trouble with relationships.
It's kind of sad when you think about it. The man who gave us the basis for our modern electrical grid, who dreamed of a world connected by this invisible energy. He ends up isolated, broke, and some people even call him a mad scientist.
That label, that mad scientist thing, it's hard to ignore, especially when you look at some of the things he was saying. Death rays, messages from Mars. It seems like he crosses the line from visionary into something else.
It's a really tough question, and it's something that Seifer tries to figure out in his book. Was Tesla's brilliance somehow connected to some kind of mental state that was, well, different? Or was he just a victim of being born in the wrong time? Were his ideas just too radical, too ahead of everyone else to be understood?
That's the question that keeps coming back to me. Was he actually mad? Or was he just misunderstood? A man with an imagination so big that no one else could even grasp it.
Maybe the answer is somewhere in between. It's clear that Tesla was incredibly intelligent. He could understand really complex science and imagine technologies that seemed impossible. But it's also clear that he had problems with people, with the practical side of making his big ideas a reality.
Maybe that's the biggest takeaway from Tesla's life. Just being a genius isn't enough. You need more than a brilliant mind to change the world. You need to work with others, be willing to compromise, and you got to figure out how to deal with people and the way society works.
Tesla's story shows us that innovation isn't always a straight line, from an idea to making it real. It's messy. It can be frustrating. You need more than just smarts. You need to be practical, keep going, even when things are tough. And maybe a little humility wouldn't hurt either.
As we wrap up our deep dive into Nikola Tesla, I'm amazed by what he accomplished. But I also feel a little sad thinking about all the things that could have been, the chances he missed. He was a man who dared to dream big, to push the limits. But in the end, maybe his biggest problem was not being able to connect that amazing vision with the world around him.
So what can we learn from all this? As we finish up our look at Nikola Tesla, we want to leave you with this. How do we balance the desire for groundbreaking new ideas with the reality of actually making them happen? It's something that anyone who wants to change the world has to think about. And Tesla's life, with all its ups and downs and contradictions, it's a pretty good lesson for anyone who wants to push the limits of what's possible. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.